tell him, a little bit of Billy's story, he's like, just stop. I'm in, Just bring him, It means a lot, but it's great friends with Billy. When I was your age, a little while ago. But great person, and I'm just thankful that he's here with you guys, and I'm glad you just spend your time to listen to his story. Okay.
All right. So guys, I like to start out with just showing you how my wheelchair works. It's called the sit and puff system. So if I puff hard, I drive. This is my slow gear. And if I sip, I turn. And if I sip hard, I stop or go backwards. So I'm quadriplegic. I can't use my hands or my legs. So this is how I get from point A to point B. Now, I've been in this wheelchair for 6 full years. I just passed the 6th anniversary of my accident. And, one of the tiny little things that's driven me crazy about being in this wheelchair is that the whole world looks down on you. Hey, Billy, hey, how you doing? And I get a lot of people patting me on the head. And it just makes me feel very inferior. Nobody wants to feel that way. So I just got a new set of wheels. And I addressed that problem specifically. So I just want to show you. Of course, I can't get my head swept. I need a little help. So I changed gears with this head switch. Just want to show you. Prepare to be amazed. Oh yeah. But wait, there's more. Tiny little thing. It's called the eye level, quality of life. Now, you can stand up, and I can stand up, and we can look each other right in the eye and have a conversation as God intended. Isn't that great? I mean, necessity being the mother of invention. So now, to the purpose of my being here today. I've been speaking for about the last 2 years, and I started out just going out telling my story, kind of unfocused. And over the last 2 years, I've spoken to high schools, public and parochial, grammar schools, middle schools, and I've built my program. And this summer, I started to think very, very specifically about how I could best be of service to people through my story. And the word that kept coming up was legacy. Legacy. So I've got a significant woman in my life. And I asked her, Alexa, what's the definition of the word legacy? And she started telling me word after word, now parts of speech. I said, Alexa, stop. And I just asked myself, what's legacy? How will you be thought of? How will you be remembered? How will you be remembered by the people that matter most? Parents, coaches, teachers, trainers, the people that matter most. How will you be remembered? And so I come to you today with a program, strategies for building a legacy. And I'm going to use my life story as the means of showing you how to build your own story. Because this is the great part. A legacy is just a story, and you are the author. You are the author. All right, first slide. Find a way to serve. Serve something bigger than yourself. By coming here to St. John's, being a part of this team, you are serving something bigger than yourself. Your wants, your needs are subservient. They come in secondary to the good of the team. Now, this photo was taken on May 19th, 1989. You see, even John Dipley didn't even know this. I was a bit of an oddball. When I was 16 years old, I knew that I wanted to be a second lieutenant in the United States Army. So, knowing that, there's only two ways to do it. Either you go to West Point, or you go to a college that has ROTC. Now, West Point, 24/7 military environment. No fun, no booze, no beer, no pizza, no girls. No, thank you. I went to Fordham University on an Army ROTC scholarship. So 5 days a week, I went to class. 1 day a week, I put on camouflage and combat boots, went through my classes, and then did 3 hours of military study, military science, military history, and then 1 weekend a month, we went to the field, qualified on weapons, did tactics, and then 6 weeks, the summers after sophomore year and junior year, I went to Fort Bragg and Fort Knox, Kentucky, for intensive training. And that led to this moment, May 19th, 1989. Just a few hours earlier, I got my diploma. I took off my cap and gown, and instead of a suit and tie, I'm the guy in dress green. I raised my right hand, swore to defend this great country of ours against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And what the commitment that I was making was, wherever you want to send me, whenever you want to send me, and whatever you need me to do once I get there, that's what I'll do. Up to and including laying down my life, if that's what's required. I was 22. It's one of the highest callings, service to something bigger than yourself. And you young men, I'm looking at you right now, and I'm looking at so much potential. I'm like so fired up looking at you. Find a way to serve. Now, it wasn't just enough for me to go in the Army. No, I had to keep going harder and harder. Next slide, please. Challenge yourself. I went to the U.S. Army Airborne School at Fort Benning, Georgia. And what you're seeing is the third week. We call it jump week. That's the fun. What you're not seeing is the first 2 weeks, Monday to Friday. 4:30, you wake up, 5 o'clock, you're in the PT pit, knocking out push-ups, sit-ups, crunches, burpees, pull-ups, chin-ups. And then, after that hour, you do a 3-mile run. Now, a 3-mile run for you guys are young studs. 3-mile run is nothing. These 3-mile runs, there were 10 of them, Monday to Friday for 2 weeks. They had to be done in 7-minute mile pace. If you fall out of a run, you get dropped from the course. And for me, that meant having to report to my permanent duty station and take command of a platoon of 30 guys. And they would be looking at me, looking for airborne wings, and saying either, A, this guy didn't go to airborne school, or B, he went and wasn't tough enough to cut it. So this is where your mentality takes over. You guys are deep into the second half of a game, and your legs are like rubber. You gotta find another gear. I was in the middle of these 3-mile runs, and my body wanted to quit, and my head would not allow me to. Simply would not allow me to. Challenge yourself. It sounds like, from what Mr. Diffley told me, that you guys have spent the last couple of days in the sand, getting a little sandy, getting a little wet. So I think you know what challenging yourself is all about. Now, my permanent duty station after airborne school, I drove from Georgia to Seattle, Washington. My home base was Fort Lewis in Tacoma, just about an hour south of Seattle. And I drove across the country, and it was just absolutely amazing, because I was a kid from Rockland County, and here I was driving across the country, and I hit Seattle, and I went to the biggest tourist trap, Space Needle. I went all the way up to the top, 500 feet, in a glassed-in restaurant, ordered myself a cheeseburger and a beer, and I looked at the sun setting over the Pacific Ocean and the moon rising over Mount Rainier. And I said, oh yeah, this doesn't suck. I spent 2.5 years on the West Coast. During that time, on the weekends, I traveled to Vancouver, Seattle, San Francisco, Monterey, Los Angeles, and a week out in Hawaii on a military hotel on Waikiki Beach. The details of that trip are still classified. It was pretty wild stuff. Now, just when I started to get too comfortable out in Fort Lewis and Tacoma, the Gulf War came up, and we had to go get the Iraqis out of Kuwait. My unit didn't deploy, and I was so bummed out. So I went to my battalion commander and said, sir, can I go and apply for a hardship tour? And he said, yeah, Billy. So I asked to go to Honduras in Central America in January of 1992 for 6 months. Next slide, please. So I went to Honduras to be the second in command to a captain. I was the first lieutenant at the time. 2 weeks into my tour, the company commander got heat exhaustion during a 3-mile run and had to get evac back to the States. So at the age of 24 and 6 months, I became the youngest company commander in the U.S. Army Southern Command. So you guys, you know this feeling. The starter gets hurt. ACL. What are the 3 words that come to mind? Next man up. Next man up. So you guys, how do you apply it to your life? In every practice, every rep, you give it everything you got, because when your number is called, you got to be ready. And my number was called. And I've got to be honest with you. There were times where I didn't know if I could do it. But what I did was, I had a company first sergeant who'd been in the Army for 15 years. He had immigrated from Chile in South America to the United States, finished high school in America, took his ESL classes, and then enlisted in the Army. Became an airborne ranger, and then qualified as a Green Beret. And he was my second in command. So when I had a difficult mission, I took him into my office and said, First Sergeant, what do you think? What do you think? So here's a great example. You guys are young student athletes. Your coaches, your trainers, the staff here at St. John's, they are here to help you. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of desire for growth. All right? So my time in Honduras was up, and so my 4-year commitment to the Army was up. And I had a choice. I could be promoted to captain, but then I would immediately have to deploy to Somalia to live in a tent. So I'd be going from a hut to a tent. I said, no thanks. I got out of the Army, came home, and for the first and only time in my life, I took a job for the money. I was a pharmaceutical sales rep for Pfizer, and for 18 months, I made more money than I had time to spend. I was living to work instead of working to live a life. So I quit. I had no plan B. I had no idea what the hell I was going to do. And I knew I had to do a soul search. So I packed up my guitar and my flute, and I went to Ireland for 3 weeks to do a soul search. And I wasn't alone. The guy who traveled with me was in his mid-50s, retired New York City police officer, great accordion player, knew every Irish song. My father. We went and we did some serious drinking and thinking about my life. And he said to me, Bill, I think you'd make a great teacher. And it hit me like somebody smacking me with a frying pan over the head. And I knew right there and then I had to become a teacher. Next slide, please. So I followed my heart. I went to Stack, St. Thomas Aquinas College for 1 year, and in 1996, I got hired by my alma mater, Albertus Magnus. I was coaching varsity soccer, freshman basketball, playing the music at all the liturgies and ceremonies. I want to take a minute and tell you about being a great teammate since I was back at Albertus. When I was a freshman at Albertus Magnus, I was a goalkeeper, a bad goalkeeper on an even worse team. In the spring of freshman year, there was another freshman who played varsity and got serious minutes. He was a brilliant player. And he came to me one day and said, Billy, when you're a senior, you're going to be my goalkeeper. I got to get you ready. He said, tomorrow, bring your gear. So I brought my gloves, my spikes, a pair of shorts, and a goalie shirt. And after school, we grabbed a bag of balls and some cones and went to a nearby baseball field. And that player taught me how to be a goalkeeper, how to handle breakaways, corner kicks, reading angles. Who's goalkeeper on the team? Show me hands. It's all about angles, right? Yeah. This player drilled me relentlessly, and I developed. By the time I was a senior, we were state ranked. That player was a first team All-American. And this guy in the wheelchair, who was a terrible goalkeeper, was transformed into all-conference and all-county. That teammate, that player, is John Diffley. That's being a team. So, this was my life. In the bottom of the picture, like all teachers, I had a second job. I played guitar, bass, tin whistle, piano, and I sang in a 6-piece, kick-ass Irish wedding band. So I was in the classroom 180 days and on stage another 80 dates a year. This was my life. Now, and I want you to take this with you when you leave. I created a very unique definition of success. I was making a good living, and I couldn't tell the difference between my work and my play. Now you guys, when you play your last lacrosse game here at St. John's, you're gonna be going on to career and real life. Take a piece of advice. Do something that you're passionate about. Because I promise you, if you do, and you love what you do, you will never feel like you're working a day in your life. You'll never feel like you're working a day in your life. And even though I was working 6 or 7 days a week, none of it felt like work. So, I married, had 2 children, and by the early 2000s, I was starting to get dad bod. So I turned myself in to the fat police. I went on the Atkins diet, dropped 40 pounds, started competing in triathlon. I also became a surfer. Next slide, please. My parents had a condo on the Jersey Shore. And in 2003, I was there with my wife and children, and my kids were babies. My father was in the last year of a struggle with thyroid cancer, and I saw him sitting on the couch with one of my kids on his knee, and I thought of the words, Carpe Diem. Any of you guys know what these words mean?
Seize the day.
Seize the day. If there's anything you want to do not wait. And I wanted to be a surfer. I wanted to feel what it was like to surf. So I went up to the boardwalk, signed up for a surf class. And I was in a surf class with 9 and 10-year-olds. I was like Buddy the Elf. But I caught that first wave, and it was instant addiction. I got out of the ocean after 3 hours, bought a board, bought a wetsuit, and every chance I got, when I wasn't on stage, when I wasn't in the classroom, or when I wasn't coaching my young son in travel baseball, I was in the ocean. And I loved it. Now, I'm going to take a very short pause and get a sip. And I want you guys to think of questions that you're going to want to ask, because one of the most important reasons why I'm here is to be a resource to you. And the way I best do that, the way I best serve you, is for you guys to ask questions. And when that moment comes after my talk, I got an incentive for you. In 2012, I recorded a CD of Irish music. If you ask a question, you get a copy of my CD. Now, mind you, it's all Irish music. So those of you who are old enough to drink, I would advise you to definitely have a couple of beers. The more you drink, the better I sound. All right? All right, back to live action, boys. Fast forward September 14th of 2013. Nobody needed me that day, so I drove down to Seagirt, New Jersey, zipped up the wetsuit, paddled out, caught waves for about an hour, paddled back out, and I saw a beautiful wave forming on the outside. I spun my board around, took a few hard paddles, and it popped up, and I was riding. Everything at that moment was perfect. I had complete mastery of my life, my work, my fitness, my nutrition, my family, my music. And then, without any warning, I got thrown off the wave. I hit my head on a sandbar in 2 feet of water, and I was instantly paralyzed. My last conscious memory is of trying to stand up, but I couldn't. And then everything faded to black. Next slide. I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Close your eyes. I'm in the water. Everything fades to black. Now what happened next all depends on your faith life. Do you believe or do you not believe? There was only one surfer in the water that day. He was paddleboarding. His name was Eric Oblitzel. He saw my body floating face down, and he knew I was drowning. He got to me very quickly, pulled my body up on the sand, and started CPR, yelling for his wife to call 911. The EMTs got there, put me on an ambulance. I was flatlined. They cut away the wetsuit from my body and defibrillated me. The first shock, no pulse. Second shock, a faint pulse. They got me to the hospital. A CT scan revealed 5 broken bones in my neck and a spinal cord bruise at the level of C4. From that moment, I would be quadriplegic. I would never regain use of my arms or legs, and I would likely never be able to breathe independently again. They put me in a medically induced coma. 2.5 weeks later, I woke open my eyes. Next slide. Open your eyes, boys. And this is the man. This is the man I became. The metal brace around my head is called a halo. It's there to completely immobilize the head and neck so that you have time for the bones to heal. Now, if you were closer to me, you'd actually be able to see there's an indentation permanently in my forehead. That was my halo. The tube coming out of my neck is a tracheostomy. I was hooked up to a ventilator because I couldn't breathe. I was transported to Helen Hayes Hospital for rehab, and every day they put me through physical, occupational, and speech therapy. And every night they gave me Ambien and Chastone to try to help me sleep, but I couldn't sleep. My grief was so profound that night after night, I lay awake trying to pray. And this is my prayer. Dear God, please take me. Please give me the mercy of a peaceful passing. I can do no more. I can't live like this. So here I was. Now think about this. When times get tough, I want you to think about what I'm about to say. I was afraid to live my life in this chair. And at the same time, I was afraid to die because I had hoped and prayed as a Roman Catholic and a Christian for my Savior to be waiting for me one day. And I was scared that he wouldn't be there to welcome me. So afraid to live and afraid to die. Think about that. That is stuff. And this went on for 8 weeks, 8 long weeks. And then something happened that changed everything. a simple phone call from a man named Stephen McDonald. In 1986, Stephen was an NYPD officer on patrol in Central Park. He was shot 3 times by a 15-year-old. The third bullet severed his spinal cord. Stephen ended up quadriplegic. And 6 months after the shooting, Stephen called the jail cell and actually said to the young man, "I forgive you. I forgive you." Isn't that amazing? I mean, think about that. The little squabbles, the fights we might get in practice with each other. Guys, look to the left and right. You are brothers. You're brothers. You are family. And if Steve McDonald could forgive the kid who shot him 3 times, think of our capacity to be compassionate and support one another. Stephen became world famous because he went out as a public speaker talking about the healing power of forgiveness. And in November, Stephen called me, and I'll never forget the words, "Billy, God has a plan for you. There's a reason why you survived. Your work is not done. After your rehab is over, you're going to come back to life because you have a significant role to play." And then right before he got off the phone, he said, "Billy, don't ever forget that in the end, there will be life. There will be life." And I could not imagine what that would be, but I knew I needed a goal. So I said, you know what? I didn't lose my mind. I didn't have a brain injury. So maybe I could return to teaching. I could return to teaching. But now, I had one huge problem. I couldn't breathe. If you can't breathe, how are you going to teach? So I said to myself, all right. I grabbed my speech therapist and I said, "Jacqueline, I need to learn how to breathe. Because if I can breathe, I can talk. If I can talk, I can teach. If I can teach, my life will have meaning. My life will have purpose." Right? And we all want that. So I got to work. But I wasn't alone. I had a great speech therapist, and I also brought back to memory the words of a great 20th and 21st century actor, author, philosopher, and thinker. Next slide, please. Rocky Balboa. In the movie Rocky Balboa, have you guys seen it? All right. So Rocky Balboa gets coerced into getting back in the ring to fight a guy named Mason the Lion Dixon. And Rocky's in his 50s, but he still wants to fight. He's still got some hunger in his belly. And he's trying to explain to his son why he wants to fight. And these are the words he said. "Nothing's going to hit harder than life. It will drive you to your knees and keep you there if you let it. And it's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward." And I kept thinking about this, and I started breathing without the ventilator 1 minute, and then 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes. And I started to see light at the end of the tunnel. And by Christmas time, I was off the vent for 30 minutes. And in that 30 minutes, I started teaching mini history lessons. And then I thought, this is going to happen. And in January, against all medical predictions, they took me off the vent, popped out the trach tube, and I've been breathing independently ever since, with just a little help from this nasal cannula. And I started to think, this is actually going to happen. Next slide. Should be the therapy slide. Lady in a white coat?
Yes.
Beautiful. See, I don't have a rear view mirror on this thing, so I have to go straight from memory. That woman in the white coat was my speech therapist, Jacqueline. She became the single most important person in my life because it was only through her that I was going to be able to reach my goal. So I'm off the vent, and after 11 long months in rehab, I'm thinking, my goal, this impossible dream, is actually going to happen. And it's going to be all smooth sailing. But I was wrong. I returned to my home after 11 months in rehab. And within just a few months, I became the victim of domestic abuse at the hands of my wife. On 4 different fronts. First, financial. There was a 2-day Irish music festival called Keenan that attracted over 6,000 people that brought money, cash and checks. When I asked how much money was raised, my wife screamed at me and said, "That money is not for you. That's for me and my sons. You put yourself in that wheelchair. That money's not for you. You put yourself in that wheelchair." And the verbal abuse just got worse. I was also subject to psychological cruelty. For a year and a half, I was not permitted to see my brothers, Jim and John, my 2 best friends in the whole world. There were security cameras in the living room to make sure that they didn't get in the house. Physical neglect. Because I wasn't given the benefit money, I was left alone in a bedroom, and I developed a life-threatening pressure sore. A wound opened on my right calf that went, it was the circumference of a tennis ball and was open clear down to the tendon. My wife saw it every day. I could neither see it or feel it. My wife was a registered nurse. By the end of the summer of 2015, she was threatening me on a daily basis to go to a nursing home. "I'm going to put you in a nursing home." So you know what I did? On September 8th of 2015, with the help of 2 caregivers, I woke up at 0500, went through 2 hours of preparation, washing, dressing, getting shaved, fed, and at 7 o'clock in the morning, I rolled down my driveway onto a handicapped, accessible bus and went back to school and started teaching. Now, I tell you this because I know you guys have gone through a rough week. Times get tough. But tough times don't last. Tough people last. And as I'm looking at you, I'm seeing it. And I'm feeling it. And I'm so amped to be here with you guys and share this moment. I went back to school. I got the gift, my dignity, my profession, what I love, my calling, helping young people for 2 full years. And then I got a life-threatening urinary tract infection that put me into a 3-day coma in March of 2017. I woke up from my coma, looked at my brothers, my mom, my parish priest, and I said, "Oh no, they're gathered around for my deathbed. This is not good." Second question, I asked my brother what day it was. Third question, I asked my doctor, when can I go back to work? When can I go back to work? So you guys are athletes. We get hurt, we get injured. Go through the rehab, keep sight, keep that goal of returning. Keep focused on it and keep moving forward. There will be setbacks. Absolutely, there will be setbacks. So, me not being able to teach anymore because of this illness was a huge setback and put me into a depression. I said, oh my God, the one thing that brought me back to life was now taken from me. What am I going to do? And I thought about the words of a rabbi named Stephen Leader. I know, a good Irish Catholic boy. What am I doing following the words of a Hollywood rabbi? And he wrote this book about human suffering, and he came up with an idea called why to what. When a bad thing happens to us, it's perfectly normal to say, why God, why me? But the people that move past it are able to say, what am I going to do with this? And that's what I did. And in September of 2017, that's what I did. Next slide. There's me in the classroom. And if you go to the next slide, I started speaking. And in one of those photos, I'm in front of 608 graders at a middle school in Rockland County. In the other photo, I had just finished a talk with the West Point baseball team, the cadets, Army baseball. And this has become my passion. So, everything that I've done in my life has been writing this legacy, writing this story. And you guys are right in the middle of writing yours. And I want to tell you from the bottom of my heart that as I look at you, I see strength, and I see compassion, and I see drive, and I see the will to overcome challenges. And I want you to support each other. You are a brotherhood. You are a family. Stick together. Now, before I take questions, I just have one more thing to say. Go Red Storm. Thank you guys. First question. Yes, in the back.
How long were you in that grieving stage, and what helped you get out of it?
Oh, the grief stage. You know what? That first 8 weeks that I got to Helen and couldn't sleep and was crying out, before I got that phone call from Steve McDonald, I was stuck in that horrible place. And I can tell you, I would have good days and bad days. There were days where even moving towards breathing, independent breathing, that I would be in the room with Jacqueline and we'd be working, and I would literally break down crying. And I would say things like, you know, Jacqueline, I am never going to be able to make love to my wife again. I am never going to be able to hug my children again. And I would take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And sometimes she just let me cry for the whole hour. And then we got right back to it the next day. So yeah, that's, it's an understanding that you're gonna have those moments, and then you get right back to work again. Because it's our human condition to try to make things better, to make tomorrow a better day than today was. And I think that's really the best way I can answer that question. But thank you for that. It's a great question. Yeah.
Was there a person, a moment, or an event similar to what happened with your father in terms of figuring out that you wanted to teach, that helped you realize that doing speeches like this might be your next step going forward?
Oh, yeah. Well, it definitely came from Stephen to be able to go out and speak. You know, when Stephen called me, I felt that his words, the words were not coming from him, but coming through him. And that has a lot to do with my faith and my Christianity. And, you know, it's something that I've just started to put my finger on in the last few talks that I've given. And I'll share it with you, and I hope it's not too weird for you. That halo was my crown of thorns. And the 8 weeks that I cried out to God was my agony in the garden. And when I was betrayed by the closest person to me. And what was I betrayed for? Money. So I'm very quick to add that I am not the Messiah. I'm not a saint. I'm not a prophet. But I learned about my suffering by thinking about Jesus. And I think that gave me the hope and the strength to keep going forward. And also to not keep this message to myself, because I felt that would be an even bigger loss if I kept it to myself. So I started going out, and 2 years later, look at me, I'm at St. John's University. You know, it's a beautiful thing. So I think it's the culmination, the cumulative effect of all of these things. Stephen, my faith,